Manny from FEMA, explain where we are in this pod. It is airtight. It's protected. What is it protected from?
It is protected from, as you mentioned earlier, high altitude electromagnetic pulse. These are pulses that occur in a small nuclear type detonation or dirty bomb. They can also occur naturally in some circumstances. What we do is we seal this. It's basically called a Faraday cage. So if you look at your cell phone right now, you will notice you have no signal. So this is sealed from the outside world, from radio waves and certain frequencies. So we protect our equipment that way before a detonation or an event with an EMP happens.
Explain to the American people, we're in this facility, explain to the American people what's in here.
Well, first of all, we have a full service studio. Obviously, we don't have a lot of space, so we had to design an area that we can have a studio, on-air studio live, and we can also record announcements off-air, so that if you had the governor come in here, or someone from the Red Cross, and they didn't have a lot of time to stay with you during a break, one can record them or record them live. We can edit the material here and put it in rotation for playback later on. So it's a full-service studio. I think we're obviously seeing that right now. In here, we also have a transmitter in this room, so that we can get it out to the public, and all the audio processing and other equipment that we need to have a radio station.
So between
function.
this facility and the tower, the idea is that we need no electricity.
That's right.
We need no internet. We need nothing. This is a self-contained government facility in which you might want to tell somebody at the Dillonville Shopping Center in Deer Park, we're going to pass out 50,000 bottles of water between 3 and 5 p.m. today. Get there and get it.
Exactly. We're self-contained. We have our own power generation, our own air sustainment systems, our own heating and cooling systems. We have facilities for the operators to rest. They're Spartan, but they work. We have sanitary facilities. We have food and water. So what normally happens really in a sustained operation is the folks that are working on the air are working very long hours. So, you don't only have to think that you're going to be stuck in here for a long period of time, but you're going to be working here for a long period of time, because in these events you have folks that are out, they're taking care of an elderly family member or children, and they may not be able to show up to work and operate on the air or operate the equipment. So the folks that are going to be here are kind of stuck, right? You're going to work long hours. So you got to have some kind of comfort and sustenance while you're working.
Basic stuff.
Basic stuff, so you can continue to provide that service.
Talk about the ability. I said this off the air. I'm a radio man for like 36 years. I do not have a transistor radio, which I'm going to correct this week. Explain why the federal government wants all Americans to have a transistor AM radio. Explain why.
AM FM radio. Look, we have multiple examples of telecommunications infrastructure suffering after a hurricane, after tornadoes, blizzards, and other emergencies. Those are just regional to local, state level emergencies. One can imagine and one can see what happens to our cellular infrastructure with a windstorm, or with an earthquake, or in a blizzard, or with a power outage situation, where some of those telecommunications services may be interrupted. How else would you be receiving information that's critical to you and your family? Where is the insulin for my uncle or my grandmother? Where are the diapers available for my kids? Where's the formula, food and water? And something extremely important that sometimes is not mentioned is reassurance. Right?
Tell people it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. Help is coming.
Relax.
Relax.
Stay where you are.
If you don't talk to people, if you don't reassure them, sometimes they have to go fend for themselves.
In a society with no electricity, and eventually no gasoline, you can use the radio in your car a little bit, but eventually you have no gasoline, you have no pumps that are working, you have no electricity. It's an EMP pulse that hit Quebec in 1989, something of that character. God forbid a nuclear attack, an invasion, EMP, whatever it might be.
Well, and what it does is it interrupts and it puts a serious load, a burden on your emergency services as well. If you don't direct, if you don't instruct, if you don't educate. You don't have enough policemen, you don't have enough ambulance services to be able to now treat people after an emergency that should have stayed home, that should have sheltered in place. So radio is a great tool to reach the public and the masses in those events. Of course, when we have cellular infrastructure or wireless infrastructure, then we obviously use those. And hopefully we don't have a situation in the future at a national scale that we would only be using radio. That would be a really bad situation. But we have had a lot of state and local events that the radio has been the saving grace, has been the backbone of communication with the public.
So the 50 to 60 acres here in Mason would be a staging area. You might have the Red Cross would be here, National Guard would be here, the governor, government officials would be here, the police and fire. And the only way to communicate is through a transistor radio.
That's correct.
That's the only way.
That's correct. And receive that critical information. And even if you don't have one in your home, maybe your neighbor does or another family member. So, you know, a lot of people can listen to one radio at a time.
Right.
Right. So that's very powerful.
Manny, do you know something we don't? Because a couple of weeks ago, Trump sent out a message to everybody like at 2:12 p.m. And now you're upgrading. We're number 2 of like 75 facilities, and I understand the numbers, millions of dollars spent just here to harden these facilities. Do you know something we don't?
No.
You don't?
No, but we do know this. We have a lot of experience in seeing disasters affect these communities. The team of our folks and I deployed to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands after Hurricanes Irma and Maria last year. We were down there for a month right after these storms hit. We know what happens in these disasters. We know how disconnected people are from information. So we want to make sure that the American public is fully aware that they remain connected, that they remain informed. There is a responsibility there that we expect them to accept, to be informed. And get yourself a battery operated radio. It may save your life.
Describe what happened in Puerto Rico, because I think the crisis there still continues to some extent or another. But for many, many months, there was literally no electricity and no communication. So what did you do at FEMA to notify millions of Puerto Ricans what to do, how to do it, and what's happening?
Well, first of all, we kept a couple of our stations on the air, providing that 24/7 coverage and information. You know, you've got 3.5 million people in Puerto Rico, 78 municipalities. You got another 100,000 people on 3 different islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands. How do you keep them informed? The only real way to do it in those circumstances was radio. So obviously we've got to keep the technical pieces working to be able to broadcast, but we also have to keep the channels of communication open between government responders from federal and state and local levels to the public. You know, where is the gasoline? All of those critical services and supplies.
Rumors. I mentioned that, weren't there rumors rampant in Puerto Rico about rioting, what was happening, and people became frightened and scared?
If you don't inform people, they'll make it up. I mean, I lived it. I've experienced it more than a couple of times. You've got to talk to people. You've got to keep them informed, and that's what we're supporting is information to the public, proper information, accurate information, life-saving information.
So if you needed 2,000 National Guardsmen to report, how would you tell a National Guardsman to report except through radio? I mean, it just don't show up out of the ether and just come to this facility. They got to be told.
Exactly, and there are other, you know, even more personal things. You know, if my mother lives in Mason and I live in Covington, right? How do I let my mother know that I am safe, or how does she let me know that she is safe? You know, she can walk over or drive over to the radio station, pass a note out to somebody, and you can have a segment, 5-minute segment every hour that you say, hey, Mary is fine. This is a message
10
for
minutes,
Uncle Ted.
10 minutes an hour, personal communication.
Yes,
you can drive here to Mason, to this facility, someone outside, here's the note, tell somebody in Salina, tell somebody in Perrysburg, I'm okay, or I'm coming there, if I can get there. So that's the purpose of this.
Extremely powerful, and what it does is it reduces traffic, it reduces injuries and accidents in post-emergency situations. So communicating with the public is extremely powerful. You've got to do that. But also, like even communications to government entities. In Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and other areas like after Hurricane Katrina that Antoine mentioned over in New Orleans, they were passing messages to the fire department and the police department. It becomes almost a dispatch as well.
Yeah.
It's because it's reaching everybody at the same time.
What did you do here? We can see these pods that I'm in, and we're broadcasting. I assume everyone's hearing this, so it's working, and you wanted to spend 1 hour from FEMA making sure this facility works, and it works. What else did you do here to harden this facility?
Well, we have been working for about a couple months now here specifically, but we've been developing this design since 2012 with some very, very critical requirements, very specific requirements. It was relatively easy to come to this facility and work with iHeartMedia and work with this county and this city to get these facilities
So
installed.
Warren County's behind this also?
Yes.
Mason's behind it.
Mason's behind it. The state is behind it. We have seen in our discussions or meetings with the different government entities where we are planning to install these, that they are always very welcoming to these facilities because they see a need being addressed that is useful to them. As I mentioned earlier, and Antoine mentioned as well, although this is built for a national emergency, it's really used for state and local emergencies.
Really, because tornadoes, we may be hit with a tornado, that's temporary. We don't see an invasion. We don't see a thermonuclear attack. We don't see the aliens landing from Alpha Centauri. We don't see that as happening, but it's a possibility.
Any of those things is possible, and so this could support any of those events. We hope those things never happen. We hope we never have to use this facility, but it is possible that it could be used. It could be anything as simple as a chemical spill. You have trains running around with hazardous materials. A lot of things can happen. It doesn't have to be a big hurricane. It doesn't have to be a HEMP attack. It could be anything like what I just mentioned.
Aren't you safer closer to this facility? If you live in Mason, aren't you safer in Mason than Deer Park? If you're close to this facility, this is where the government's going to protect this at all costs?
Well, one could say that. I think everyone's going to do everything they can to make sure that the entire population is safe.
Sure.
But there would be,
I want to be by Mason.
There would be a lot of attention given to this.
Well,
area.
how would I get here? I live like 10 miles away. What do I do?
Well, we have processes and some authorities that allow us to accredit you to be able to move about.
To get here.
To provide the service through our office.
Well, if I was locked in here, could I be locked in with Rachel and not Tony Bender? Is there a possibility I could be with her instead of him?
I would do everything possible.
Thank you, Manny. You're my guy. I don't want to look at his ugly asshole. I want to look at Rachel. So you would designate which persons to be in here. Is that correct?
Actually, we actually we allow the station because it is your station to make that first tier decision on.
Sorry, Tony.
Who to utilize, what personnel. In the event that station personnel, iHeartMedia, WOW personnel are unavailable, we will also be training state and local authorities to operate it.
They'd rather have the local personality that people know who they are.
Your voice is recognized. You have created a psychological connection with your audience for 36 years.
36.
So that is extremely valuable to the program, right? They don't want to hear me. They want to hear you. You have been talking to them forever. The on-air staff of the station is being heard every day. So that is the first priority.
And we're one of 77 or so across the
74 with
74.
the relays that we had mentioned.
So we're second. You picked us to be second because?
Well, you have a very large population area, a very important area of the country. There is a need to modernize this facility. Some of these facilities, we first introduced them back in the 90s. So we are now modernizing and bringing them up to the 22nd century, so to speak.
And we'll hopefully be here for the rest of this century.
Let's hope so.
I'm not sure you and I will be here for the rest of this century.
I hope for as much as we can.
I hope, but I don't think it's likely. But I feel safe, warm, and protected, like in my mother's arms right here. This ain't bad. This is a nice. Now, it'd be pretty boring for hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month to broadcast. But I got the strawberries, I got the pilaf, I got the scrambled eggs and bacon, I got a pot, and I got a bed.
Tasty.
Tasty. That's all I need. Well, Manny Centeno, and where are you going to go next? What's your next facility?
Our next facility is in Chicago, and we have several in our next spiral of locations to modernize.
All right, so you'll be busy. How many more years will it take to finish this?
About another 4 to 5 years to wrap them up. We might be able to do it a little sooner if we savvy up, but it takes a while. You've got to go through a whole process of permitting with the local authorities, environmental studies, historical preservation, all of those things that are necessary to tie in these facilities to the land.
I pray to God I'm never in here again. My goal in life is never come to your pod again in the Mason antenna of the tower. But if it is, I guess it is what it is, and we move on.
You're welcome to come in and sample the culinary delights that we have available here for emergencies.
Heater X meals, I see that, and I could live in here for 60 days at a minimum.
Yes, sir.
And the federal government would protect this facility at all costs.
We want to make sure that you provide the public accurate, life-saving information.
Manny Centeno, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Now let's continue with more. Bill Cunningham, the Great American Live from the transmitter from a FEMA facility somewhere in an undisclosed location under a brick and steel building near Mason on 700 WLW.